All right. Hey, welcome to Devonair Community Church. I'm Pastor Joanne Bastine, not Bastion. So, um, and if hopefully you listened to my last episode, and I kind of gave some updates on Devonair Community Church and some things that are happening. We were posting our videos, we were posting our audio podcasts and up until the pandemic, and then with some things kind of because everybody started streaming and we started streaming, it was just one more thing and we had to let something go. And we're still trying to figure out how to get that back up and running. So some of it just has to do with time and resources. Anyway, I thought what I would do for the next, couple of months, and we'll practice. We'll see how this goes. I will do a 10-minute summary of our sermon from Sunday. I started several weeks ago in the book of Judges and so I'm calling this series Breaking Bad. Please ignore my dog. He's going to find everything that's crinkly, and that's what he's going to chew on, because whatever. He's 7 months old, so that's why. So I started the series in the book of Judges called Breaking Bad, and I want to go back and do just a 10-minute summary of each sermon. I'll do one at a time. So this is just going to be the first week, which is Judges chapter 1, verses 1 through 10, and verse 19. I want to read it for you. All right, Judges chapter 1. After Joshua's death, the Israelites asked the Lord, "Who should go up first to fight for us against the Canaanites?" The Lord said, "The tribe of Judah will go up first. I've handed over the land to them." So the tribe of Judah said to the tribe of Simeon, their brothers, "Come up with us into our territory and let's fight against the Canaanites. Then we'll go with you into your territory." So Simeon went with them. When Judah went up, the Lord handed them the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and they defeated 10,000 men at Bezek. Jumping down to verse 8, the people of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it, and they killed the people with their swords and set the city on fire. Afterward, the people of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who lived in the highlands, the southern plain, and the western foothills. Caleb said, "I'll give my daughter Aksa as a wife to the one who defeats and captures Kiriath Sefer." Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, so Caleb gave him his daughter Aksa as a wife. When she arrived, she convinced Othniel to ask her father for a certain piece of land. As she got down from her donkey, Caleb said to her, "What do you want?" And Aksa said to Caleb, "Give me a gift. Since you've given me land in the southern plain, give me springs of water." Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. Thus the Lord was with the tribe of Judah, and they took possession of the highlands. However, they didn't drive out those who lived in the plain because they had iron chariots. But the people of Benjamin didn't drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites still live with the people of Benjamin in Jerusalem today. All right, all of that is for the Lord. Thank you for joining me today. And so those of you who are familiar with Breaking Bad, the television show, Walter White is the main character. He's a chemistry teacher. He had a lot of promise and potential early on, and he was set to end up in Silicon Valley, be a bigwig, etc. Watch the show, you'll know that his best friend does become extremely successful, and for a series of different reasons, Walter ends up becoming a high school chemistry teacher instead. And so the show opens with him. He is a high school chemistry teacher. His oldest son has, I believe, muscular dystrophy and is like 16 or 17. His wife is pregnant with her second child, like 6 months pregnant with her second child. And he finds out that he has terminal lung cancer. That's the opening of the show. And the show's been on Netflix for a very long time. So if this is a spoiler alert, too bad. Anyway, he decides that he needs to figure out a way to provide for his family when he's gone. And so he becomes a drug lord, and he makes what they're calling pure crystal meth in the show, because he's a chemistry teacher and he knows how to make it so that you'll get the most bang for your buck. And it's still not good for you, but whatever. I'm not promoting drug use, but the whole idea is the idea of Breaking Bad. It's a slang term that comes from the Southwest region of the country, and it means to break from societal norms. And so really it's this idea of him reinventing himself, but breaking from societal norms in order to do it. And so really this sets up the whole idea of the book of Judges. One of the things that we have to understand in the book of Judges is the Israelites have been given this land. What we now call Israel was then the land of the Canaanites. And what you have to really understand this idea of a vassal treaty. So in those days, the Sumerian vassal treaty, a king could take a piece of land and give it to a vassal, a member of his country, to oversee, and he would give it as a gift. Oftentimes when he did this, it was because that particular part of land, he was having trouble controlling the people who lived there. They were out of control. And so he would put somebody there, and they kind of basically became crowd control for that area of the country. And so if you know a little bit about the history of the Old Testament, God gives Abraham this land, and he enters into what is this idea of a Sumerian vassal treaty. Once that land is given by a king, you have it, it's passed on from generation to generation, which was why it was such a big deal that Abraham didn't have an heir. When Abraham died, it was going to go to his servant, and it would no longer be part of the family because he didn't have any heirs. And so it was a pretty big deal that Sarah has Isaac, because now the land and the promise of this land would continue to be passed down. So here they are. Joshua has led the Israelites into this promised land, the land that they had the promise that God gave to Abraham years ago. Now they were going to fulfill it. And really, they were supposed to go in and they were supposed to be crowd control. They were supposed to set up a new standard, the kingdom of heaven coming to earth, right? So the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, which you hear about in the New Testament. The reason that Jesus has to come is because we couldn't get it right. They just couldn't get it right. And so they go in and they are supposed to, in a sense, break from societal norms of the Canaanites and set up a new standard, a new way of doing things. But what happens in the book of Judges is the Canaanites break them, so to speak. And so they, rather than breaking from the societal norms of the Canaanites, they embrace the societal norms, and they break from the ways of God. And so they start out really strong in this first chapter, and they're asking the question, who will go first, right? First Moses led, then Joshua led. Now Joshua is gone. So who's going to lead us? Who will go first? And this really is a question that you and I have to ask in our own lives. Who will go first? Some of you you need to break away from the norms of your family, the ways that it has been done in your family for generations and generations is not healthy. They're not healthy ways of communicating. They're not healthy patterns of living. And so some of you may be the first one. You may be the person who goes first to break the cycle of abuse. Maybe you're the first one. You're the one who goes first to break the cycle of addiction to alcohol or to drugs or to both. You're the first one to break away and to get a college degree or a professional, vocational certification, right? You're the first one to break generational poverty. You're the first one to move away from where you were raised geographically, maybe going to a new state or a new country, or maybe you have left your country and you've come here to the United States, and you're the first one in your family to do that. And so we want to ask ourselves, if we're followers of Jesus, sometimes God is asking us to go first. You're the first one to speak up. You're the first one to do things differently. You're the first one to plant a church. You're the first one to start a new ministry. There are many ways that God says you're the one who's going to go first. And as we look at this idea that God chose Judah to go first, we want to remember that this is grace. It just doesn't say that the other tribes weren't chosen. It says that Judah was chosen to go first, that this is an act of grace. So even as we think about this in our own lives, want to remember that it is God's grace at work in our life. Anytime we are asked or chosen by God to be the first one, it is an act of grace. For whatever reason, God chose us. Oftentimes, it's not because we're the smartest or we're the best looking or we're the most talented. Sometimes it's because we are simply willing to be faithful, and that's why He has chosen us. And I know that a lot of times we look at people who have accomplished great things in our area of where maybe it's our vocation, right? Maybe it's maybe you work in the medical field, maybe you're an engineer, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're in ministry. And we look at people who are successful in that area where we work, and we think that it happened overnight. And quite often it's grace. I'm not going to use the word luck because I don't think that that's true. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And often I think that's what happens with grace, that God chooses us because we're prepared to hear from Him and we're willing to be obedient. So are you prepared to hear from God, and are you willing to be obedient? That really seems to be the precursor for experiencing His grace and His favor in your life. There's a lot of good people who have had different opportunities or not had the same opportunities as you. So we want to be careful that we don't say that because someone hasn't experienced those things, that they're not obedient or they're not faithful or they're not prepared. But I do believe that preparation and a heart that's open to God and a willingness to be faithful and obedient plays a huge role. And Judah was willing to go first, which is why God chose them. It doesn't mean that the other ones weren't willing to go, but it does mean that they were willing. So God chose Judah, and Judah chose Simeon. Always take somebody with you if you can. If you have been chosen to go first, take somebody with you. encourage somebody else. If we have had someone else open the door for us, our job is to hold that door open for the people coming behind us, not to slam it in their face, right? Encourage somebody else, pour into somebody else. I'm not talking about paying it forward. I'm talking about paying it backwards. Is really important for us to do. So God chose Judah, and Judah chose Simeon, and Caleb chose Othniel. Now there's this little line in it that really kind of goes overlooked. Caleb and Othniel are both Kenites, and Kenites are really kind of engrafted into the promise. So they're part of it because they married into it. They have a lineage to Moses' in-laws. And so Caleb, here's what you have to understand. Caleb and Othniel were so faithful that this idea of porous boundaries, they weren't hard boundaries. So it says something to us. If you're on the outside looking in and you feel like, man, I can never be a part of that. I don't live up to those expectations. And maybe you look at other people of faith and you're like, man, I could never have a faith like that. Caleb and Othniel are examples of having hearts that are open to God and willing to be obedient. Being open to the things of God is very inviting to him, and God wants to enfold those people into his family. And so I encourage you, if you haven't been chosen first or been chosen to go first, and you feel like I'm on the outside looking in, I want you to understand this, that God very much honors people who have a heart that's open to him and willing to be obedient. And that is worth, in God's economy, that is worth more than talent, the way you look, your abilities, your education. In God's economy, a heart that's open to him and a willingness to be obedient, much more valuable than those things. All right, so I'm just leaving you with that for this sermon. I hope it blessed you, and have a great week.